We all know that foods are perishable by nature, right? During processing and storage of foods, numerous changes takes place which may adversely affect the quality attributes in foods. During storage, foods change progressively and become less attractive, palatable, and eventually unfit for consumption sometime. During storage, foods are exposed to a wide range of environmental conditions. Temperature, humidity, oxygen, and light are the major environmental factors which can trigger several reactions that may lead to food deterioration and spoilage. During processing, many precautions are being taken by manufacturers, but many form of quality deterioration takes place in processed foods. For example, one is natural pigments. Generally, natural pigments change color. For instance, lycopene in tomatoes. Lycopene in tomatoes from red to brown. And another example is oil can separate from emulsion products, giving unattractive appearance. For instance, in salad dressing creams. Another one, freezer burn. Freezer burn may appear as white surface areas caused by sublimation of water vapor from exposed portions. We can see this kind of change in frozen foods. And loss of crispiness can occur if the food is hygroscopic in nature. It's generally observed in bakery and confectionery products. One or more quality attributes of such kind in most of the processed foods may reach an undesirable state when they keep for storage upon for a certain period. At that stage, the food is considered unsuitable for consumption and it is said to have reached the end of its shelf life. The important objectives of this session is to aware the shelf life of processed foods and factors influence their shelf life, and to learn about the methodology to determine the shelf life of processed foods, and to know the date marking and other regulatory requirements. So, before starting our presentation or in this session, we just know about shelf life. What is mean by shelf life? Shelf life is an important feature of all foods. Shelf life of a food product may be defined as the time between the production and packaging of the product and the point at which it becomes unacceptable under defined environmental conditions. The shelf life of a food is the period that the food remains safe and suitable for consumption. During the shelf life period, the loss of nutrients below the levels listed on food and nutrition label and the formation of toxic products within the food should not happen, and the food must be safe for the consumption. Now we will see effect of processing and storage on shelf life of the foods. Naturally, there are many changes occurred in foods during storage period. In raw, fleshy foods like meat and fish, rapid changes occur easily. Changes can take place over a period of days or weeks in bread and biscuits as it becomes moldy and stale and soft respectively. The changes in the quality could not identify until years with respect to storage of some processed foods. Reduction, elimination and retardation of the growth of microorganisms in food which ultimately extend the shelf life of the food are few of the principles of food processing. But many processing techniques will not totally eliminate the microorganisms. Hence, some microorganisms will still survive even after processing, which are known as heat resistant spores. I will tell you an example. For example, you take pasteurization and chilled storage, etc. What happened is, after processing, though they may be below detection level in food, they will survive and grow during storage period and the food become unacceptable and unsafe to consume. Sometimes processing provides an opportunity to contamination through processing environment as well as post-processing contamination. For example, before and during packaging. Hence, though shelf life is an important feature of all foods, shelf life of processed foods has more significance among consumers. The storage period, the shelf life, is therefore an essential aspect to design and development of processed foods. Not only in view of consumer, it is a requirement of good manufacturing practice as well as a requirement of the international standards for quality systems. Okay, now we will see the factors that influence the shelf life of processed foods. The shelf life of processed foods is reliant on various interacting factors. The shelf life of one particular food is quietly different from other foods. Hence, understanding the factors that influence the storage characteristics of the foods are very important to arrive at an appropriate shelf life of different foods. We will see the various factors now. The first one is intrinsic factors that impact on shelf life. The intrinsic factors are, number one, the nature and quality of the raw material, and the second one is the formulation of the food product, and the next one is the structure of the food product, and the other one is the availability of the oxygen and redox potential within the food. Coming to the extrinsic factors that impact on the shelf life. The extrinsic factors are the application of processing methods and techniques, which is an important one. The other one is the application of cooling methods, and the next one is packaging materials and methods used in processing, and storage temperature, conditions during distribution, storage and display. These are all the factors which influence the shelf life of the various processed foods. Now, we will know about the date marking, which is an important aspect in shelf life, and regulatory requirements for processed foods. The shelf life of a food product begins from the time the food is manufactured. Date marking can be either use by or a best before date. Date marking is essential and required for all processed and packaged foods with a shelf life of less than 2 years, except infant formula where it is required irrespective of length of the shelf life period. Coming to best before date. What is meant by best before date? Best before date means the date in relation to a package of food which signifies the end of the period during which the intact package of the food, if stored in accordance with any stated storage conditions, will remain fully marketable and will retain any specific qualities for which express or implied claims have been made. Coming to use by date. Use by date means the date in relation to a package of food which signifies the end of the estimated period if stored in accordance with any stated storage conditions, after which the intact package of food should not be consumed because of health and safety reasons. For instance, if a food product is claimed as a health food, which is a source of vitamins or minerals or any other nutrient, the amount of that nutrient should not fall significantly below the level stated in the food or nutrition label. If the level of nutrient is below the stated level, then it could be harmful to health. A use by date will be required. In this case, a use by date marking is required for health reasons. Use by date marking is required for safety reasons because the level of microorganisms present must not increase to a harmful level in the foods. For such food products in which the pathogenic microorganisms are grow in the food during storage period, it could lead to food poisoning. Hence, use by date is required for safety reasons. The food must retain the desirable quality attributes like physical, chemical, microbiological and sensory or organoleptic characteristics for consumer acceptance. If the food products lost their quality attributes, then they become unacceptable for consumption. In such cases, the shelf life will be indicated by a best before date. In this figure, in the decision tree, we can work out whether use by or best before is applicable for date marking. Shelf life studies. How to conduct the shelf life? Now we will learn how to conduct the shelf life for processed foods. A shelf life study is an objective, methodical means to determine long a product can reasonably be expected to keep for without any appreciable change in the quality. A separate study needs to be carried out for each type of the product. Generally, there are two main methods used to conduct the shelf life studies. First one is the direct method and another method is the indirect method. So, in direct method, this is the one most commonly used. It involves storing the product under pre-selected conditions for a period of time longer than the expected shelf life and checking the product at regular intervals to see when it begins to spoil. The exact procedure is unique for each particular product. Coming to indirect method, this approach uses accelerated storage and predictive microbiological modeling to determine a shelf life. Now, we will see step by step determination of shelf life by the direct method. In the first step, identify what may cause the food to spoil or become unsafe. Each product will have its own set of factors that may limit its shelf life, that we know, right? Use the following list as a starting point to help to identify all the possible ways that the product may deteriorate in quality and or safety. Coming to product related spoilage. Raw materials. The quality, consistency, level of contamination and storage of raw material will all affect the final product. And the second one is product makeup. Any changes to the properties of ingredients or the ingredients themselves may affect the shelf life, that we have to see. And the next one is water activity. This is the amount of water in a food that is available to be used by microorganisms. And another one is the pH. This is a measure of acidity or alkalinity. The other points that has to consider is oxygen availability, the types and amounts of preservatives that can be used. And coming to the other one is process related spoilage. The choice of process can alter the shelf life of final product. For example, if we take UHT milk. UHT milk is a sterilized product and has a longer shelf life than pasteurized milk, as the heat treatment is much greater. And the next one is packaging. The other one is storing. By now, you should have identified all the possible ways the product could deteriorate and the factors involved should have been identified. Next, we will go for step 2. Which test to use to conduct the shelf life? Select a suitable test for determining the safety and quality of the product. In general, tests can be divided into the following 4 categories. The first one is sensory evaluation. Sensory evaluation, in other terms, are called as organoleptic evaluation. It assesses a food's smell, appearance, flavor and texture. It can be used to monitor and record obvious changes that occur over time and is therefore useful when determining the shelf life of a food. The food should be assessed under the conditions at which it is designed to be stored and consumed. Ideally, this could be done by a trained panel using recognized evaluation methods. Remember one, always check the food is safe to eat before using a taste panel. And coming to the microbiological. These tests can be used to evaluate both food quality and safety. Tests may be done to estimate changes in the number and type of spoilage organism, and generally yeast, molds or bacteria, which are occurring over time. Identification of any food poisoning organisms present is important for food safety. Tests required will depend on the particular product. Microbiological standards and guidelines give guidance on the types of organism and their number that can be considered acceptable or unsafe in a food. And the next one is the chemical. Chemical tests can detect changes in the product's quality throughout its shelf life. Examples of instrumental chemical tests include pH, headspace gas analysis, free fatty acid and total volatile nitrogen. And the other one is physical test. Physical tests include tests for measuring the product texture, examination of packaging, travel test and determining the best, worst and average retail conditions. And next we will go for step 3, plan the shelf life study. So while planning the shelf life study, we have to consider what tests need to be carried out. And the second one, how long will the study run for and how often will the test be carried out. Include the actual sampling dates in your plan. It is suggested that sampling be carried out at the beginning, at the target end and at about 3 occasions in between. Another sampling should be carried out beyond the target to confirm the endpoint selection. How many samples will be tested each time? At least triplicate packs of product should be tested at each sampling. Next one is how many samples will be needed for the whole study period? And then when will the study be run? Next we will go for step 4, run the shelf life study. During the study, samples should be stored under the same conditions as your normal production samples from manufacturer through to consumption. If this is not possible, the sample should be stored at a known temperature and humidity. These needs to be checked and recorded regularly. In the other step, determine the shelf life. Eventually, a point is reached when the product no longer meets the quality standard. Using all information you have recorded and observed, decide how long the product can be kept and still be of an acceptable quality and safety. Look at your test results and if any of them don't make sense, repeat the shelf life study. Now, we have an estimated shelf life that is based on ideal storage conditions. Now, you have to calculate the working shelf life. Next, step 6. After conducting all these things, we have monitored the shelf life. Continue to monitor the product to ensure it is safe and of good quality throughout its whole shelf life. So, this is about the direct methods. Coming to the indirect methods. What are indirect methods? Indirect methods attempt to predict the shelf life of a product without running a full-length storage trial. Hence, they can be useful for products with long shelf lives. The two most common indirect methods are, number 1, accelerated shelf life studies. In this, the trial period shortened by deliberately increasing the rate of deterioration. This is usually done by increasing the storage temperatures. The results are then used to estimate the shelf life under normal storage conditions. Second one is predictive modeling. Predictive models are mathematical equations which use information from a database to predict bacterial growth under defined conditions. Predictive models can be used to calculate the shelf life of a food. Most predictive models are specific to a particular type of organism. Food safety and technology consultant should be able to assist with specific predictive modeling trials or problems. It's very important. Coming to methodology of shelf life determination. Storage of foods for significant periods is required for shelf life determination during development of modification of the product. Batches of samples to be taken at significant stages for shelf life determination, and these samples should be evaluated throughout storage period, usually under controlled conditions, until their quality becomes unacceptable. The potential storage problems can be identified during the evaluation of stored food samples, and they can be either eliminated or controlled before the food goes into production. If the quality of the food product turns unacceptable before the end of the shelf life period, then the product development further required reformulations, optimization, packaging, etc. If the test results could not attain the target shelf life, then decision should be taken whether to launch the product with a shorter shelf life or not. An ongoing quality assurance system is equally important at the stages of production and involves fresh product assessment before it released into the distribution. The evaluation should continue throughout the assigned shelf life for stored samples. The changes in the storage performance of the product can be identified and appropriate actions are taken. An efficient customer complaint management system should establish to identify the shelf life problems from consumer side. Finally, an up-to-date, effective and operable product recall system is the last resort that recalls defective products. The factors affecting shelf life as well as the requirements for determining the shelf life are quite different from food to food and product to product. The shelf life of fresh food is different from processed food category. It is again varies from product to product. For example, if you take chilled foods, which may be stable for 3 to 4 days, whereas ready to eat breakfast cereal have a long shelf life as they belongs to category of foods that are inherently stable. And another aspect that we want to discuss right now is shelf life and storage guidelines. Okay, let's see what is the storage guidelines. It requires the processed foods to carry a date of minimum durability in the food label. For instance, best before, we already discussed earlier, best before date is the date mark usually appear on the labeling of processed food. The best before date is the date up to which the food can be expected to retain its specific characteristic. After this date, the appearance and quality could affect, but it may still be edible. I'll tell you one example, okay. If you see crisp biscuits might become soggy when the food is microbiologically highly perishable. Then the best before date must be replaced by use by date. It is an offense to sell any product as it contributes danger and unsafe to human health. The foods, especially the processed foods, have a product code stamped either on the top or bottom of each bag, providing information such as best before or use by date, the name of the manufacturer and the lot number. For instance, the manufacturer may indicate the use by date as month and year. For example, it is November 27, 2016. Stamped on the top of the can mean the food should be consumed by November 27, 2016. The coding system may not be consistent from one manufacturer to another. The consumer must follow the guidelines provided on the food label. If a product has a use by date, follow the date. If it has no date, cook, use or freeze the products within the period indicated in recommended storage food chart. Okay students, now we will summarize the whole session once again. During storage and processing of foods, numerous changes takes place which may adversely affect the quality attributes in foods that ultimately leads to food deterioration. The shelf life of a food is the period that the food remains suitable and safe for consumption. Hence, shelf life is an important feature of all foods. The storage period, the shelf life is therefore an essential aspect in design and development of processed foods. It is a requirement of good manufacturing practice as well as a requirement of the international standards for quality systems. Understanding the factors that influence the storage characteristics of the foods are very important to arrive at an appropriate shelf life for different foods, because the shelf life of one particular food is quietly different from other foods. Date marking is essential and required on all processed and packaged foods. Date marking can be either a use by or a best before date. Thank you.